to sit down now, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah,
It,
just packed, so I wanted to make sure to get there on time.
yay. Okay. Now let's make that right. There you go. Right, we've done that. So let's go back to Zoom. Is it on? Here we are. There we are. Got it. All right, lovely. Okay. So we're going to start off with our tefillah. And let me share that. Share screen. Tefillah. Okay. ריבון העולמים ואדוני אדונים, אב רחמן וסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה בהשתחוויה, שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש, ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומה חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו, חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחול ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולבבך, תקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ויהיה לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך קרח ניחוח. ותאציל עלינו אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבודך הקדושים, אשר על ידם גלית דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבן לקשר בדברים אלו. ובזכותם תראה עינינו במה שאנו לומדים, כמאמר נעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לו רצונים מפי, ויגון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. Amen. Can you ratzon? Okay, so at the moment it's you and me. So that's great. All right. Now what we're going to learn is Shmot. It's we're going to start off with two pieces of Zohar I want to look at today and see how we go. One is from Shemot and one is from Bo, and they're both on the idea of what are we getting rid of, okay, in when we're clearing out the chometz. What is this actual aspect of the Egyptians, of the chometz, of the Korban Pesach, and we're actually going to have a look at that today. So now let me just share my screen. I don't think I did that properly. Okay, so this is a piece from the Zohar, and it's on the phrase B'chol Elohei Mitzrayim Eseh Shvatim. Against all the gods of the Egyptians, I will do judgment. Okay, and we'll find out, in fact, it's very relevant for us today as well. Amar Rabbi, let me make that a bit smaller, because I've gone off the page there. There we are. Amar Rabbi Yudai, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ma hava machshavaton de Mitzray, de mamana mi'Yisrael priya u'revia, v'shartana de mamana alehon da'il bil bahon kach, אלא אמר להון, הווה ידעין, דזמין ברא אחד על המפק מישראל, תתעבדין דינה באלוהי הון על ידי. Rabbi Yudai said, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, what was the thought of the Egyptians to try to prevent Israel from multiplying? And the thought was of their ministering angel who was appointed over them, who put it into their heart. How do we know this? Because it says in the text, Vayomer el Amon, he said to his people. Now it says somewhere else in the Zohar that if it says Vayomer Paro, then it means Pharaoh said, okay? But if it just says Vayomer, and it doesn't say who it was, then actually what it means is the ministering angel was actually putting it into their mind. Okay? All right, and he answers. Ela amar lahem. What did he actually say to them? Hayudim sheben echad atid letzeit Yisrael. They knew that there was going to be one son who in the future was going to come out of Israel. She'aseh din al yado belohechem. That will actually do justice against their gods. Well, we told him he's going to do justice against your gods if he's talking to them. Okay, so what was the actual decree against the children of Israel, against the children? And that was that they were told, the midwives were told, that every son needs to be thrown into the Nile, but every girl child you can keep alive. So in order to understand what this is about, we need to understand what the Egyptians are and what does they mean, and we need to understand what is the difference between a male and a female in this case. All right? So what is the Egyptian? The term Egyptian, Mitzrayim, means a narrow place. All right? And when a person is just seeing himself, is just functioning from his own ego, that's a very narrow consciousness. Okay? So the Egyptians were called Elvat Haaretz. They're the most, adulterous place of the world. In other words, they were just there for their whole culture, their whole being was simply about feeding their own wills to receive. And what was true then is also true now. Every single aspect that we have in the Torah is actually a present aspect within ourselves. There's a very powerful piece in Zohar Ba'alotcha in which Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai makes it very, very plain that the Torah is not a history book, okay? And to read it as a history book is completely miss the point. So when it's talking about, when we read in the Torah, we read in the Haggadah, the story of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, it is not talking about actually what happened 3,000 years ago. That's not what it's about. It's actually talking about our relationship with God right now. So we need to first understand what is the Egypt that we are in, okay, which is our egoistic consciousness, which is the Mitzrayim, which is our will to receive for ourselves alone, okay? And the difference between and the idea of the male, okay, is in the Kabbalah, male is associated with giving and female is associated with receiving. So the idea of casting the male into the Nile means that the Egypt within us, the Egyptian within us, doesn't want to oops, sorry, I just dropped my glasses. The Egyptian within us doesn't want us to give, okay? Wants to throw our ability to give unconditionally into the Nile, all right? Whereas it's quite happy if we carry on receiving, okay? So the male aspect, which is the giving aspect that we have, it wants to throw away, and the female aspect, which is our receiving aspect, yes, that's perfectly okay, all right? So the idea of the ministering angel is the idea of the thought, okay? All right, there's some thought there which is saying, if you allow yourself to give unconditionally, that's going to upset the ego. And it said that they knew that there was going to be one male son who's in the future going to come out from Israel, from the soul, okay, which is going to do justice against the gods of the Egyptian, against the will to receive for itself alone. So you can actually take that same paragraph, okay, and really relate it to ourselves. Shin Yud Chet. Leah, just call out if you've got any questions, because it's only you and me, so we might as well enjoy ourselves. All right. Dama Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, B'shah shama Moshe, ובכל אלוהי מצרים 10 שבטים, הלך דומה, שרו של מצרים, 400 פרסה. אמר לקודש בריך הוא, גזרה נגזרה לפניי, דכתיב, יפקוד השם על צבא המרום במרום, ובאותו שעה נטלה השררה ממנו, ונתמנה דומה, שר של גיהינום, לידון שם נפשות רשעים. רבי יהודה אומר, על המתים נתמנה. So, and against the gods of the Egyptians, so the gods are in like the focuses, the what the world to receive for itself alone desires, what it worships, what it you know holds on to. I will do judgment. So at that point, the ministering angel of the Egyptian ran off 400 miles, parsot, whatever they are, okay? And Rabbi Ashlag adds from fear. That's interesting, okay? We find the will to receive for ourselves alone very difficult to throw away or to stop using, or we get it when the idea to stop using our ego comes in. A person can actually make him quite anxious. You know, what's going to be? We're all brought up, or at least I was brought up in London, and certainly this is true for my friends who've been brought up in America. That to be taught to be, you know, independent, to what you're doing for yourself is good, kind of thing, and anything else is just a fryer. All right,
Yeah.
and yeah, and to actually sort of like give up looking out for yourself actually wakes up a tremendous amount of fear. All right, you know, and you've really got to exercise your trust in God at that point. You know, you'll be Tahon Bashem. All right, it's really I can really relate to this. And when it says Albameot 400, the number 4 it symbolizes completeness in the Kabbalah, because it's a complete stage. Like, you've got the 4 main Sfirot, Chochmah, Bina, Tiferet, and Malchut, who are represented by the 4-letter name of God, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. On Seder night, you've got the 4 cups of wine, the 4 stages of redemption. You've got the 4 worlds. So, you know, and then you get 40 and 400. These just are different levels of the same idea of completeness. So he got really frightened. Okay, so when the will to receive oneself alone gets threatened, that is very often a cause of a lot of fear for a person. So it's nice to know where that fear comes from. And so this is sort of in a parable. The Holy Blessed One said to him, there's a decree before me, and you can't change it. God is going to charge or decide your fate of the host on high. Okay, at that moment, the governance was taken away from that ministering angel of the Egyptians, and Doma was appointed to be the ministering angel of hell, to judge there the souls of the wicked. Now, in another part of the Zohar, it actually talks about Doma and this ministering angel in charge of hell. And he's called Domer because it means like. It's when a person imagines that the way that God thinks and acts, so to speak, I know it's difficult to sort of apply words like God thinking or God acting, you know, for God, but we have to sort of use some language. All right, the way we perceive God's light all right, is if we imagine that God is like a human being, that is the hell that we cause ourselves. All right. So, like, for example, we've had a very turbulent time in Israel with the terrorists, and what's happening in the Ukraine is just appalling, beyond appalling. Um, and yet, if we try to blame God and say God shouldn't allow this to happen, what we're really doing is we're simply relating to God as if he's a human being, right? A bigger and better or something. But basically, we're putting our thoughts and our understandings onto him. All right. And it's a kind of a projection. And when we do that, we actually create a hell, because we begin to complain. We blame God. We feel more suffering. Okay. And that's what he means, is that this is a hell of imagination that we get ourselves into when we blame God. And that's why he says the souls of the wicked, from the word lahoshia, to blame God. So, okay. So that's what this angel of Duma. So it's interesting. It is kind of saying against the gods of the Egyptians, against the one that's really forcing the children of Israel, the part of the soul within us that wants to do good, and it keeps blocking that by not allowing it to do giving. I'm going to move that. I'm going to move that to another sort of mental place. And now it's, if you sort of project the way God acts as if he's a human being. So it's kind of interesting. Amar Rabbi Hanina said, Ketiv Belohem Asa Shem Shvatim, and against their gods, God will do justice. וכי באלוהי של כסף ושל זהב ושל עץ ושל אבן יש שבטים? אלא אמר רבי יוסי, של כסף ושל זהב היו נדחים מאלוהיהם, ואל עץ מתרכבים. Rabbi Hanina said, it's written, and against their gods, God did justice. And he said, well, against the god of a god of silver or of gold or of wood or of stone, okay, there is justice. Judgment, yeah. Judgment, yes, that's a better translation, thank you. But Rabbi Yossi said of silver and of gold, they kind of melt of their own, and of tree they rot. I'm not sure what it means here. And it's very interesting. You've got a stone is inanimate, okay? Tree, the plant, that is a plant. Silver and gold are metal. Silver, generally speaking, is used in the Kabbalah to talk about the right-hand side, and gold is the left-hand side. Of a right-hand side is the desires of giving, and generally it's positive, but there is a klipa of the right-hand side, which is laziness, in fact. And just, fatalistic, I'm just going to have faith in God. I'm not going to do anything at all, just going to lie back and let it all happen. That's the klipa of the right-hand side. The klipa of the left-hand side is the will to receive. And there's different levels of the will to receive, which is also the tree, the plant level of the will to receive is the level of luxuries. When somebody wants, sensual luxuries, that's the level of the plant level. And the will to receive, which is for ourselves alone, which is the inanimate, is the will to receive at the most basic, which is a survival. So he says, against all the different levels of the wills to receive, he's going to do judgment. Yeah, thank you. It's a better translation. Okay. Oh, I think Rachel's here. Hello, love. Rabbi, right, Shinkaf. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said,
Hello.
Hi. Okay. Amar Rabbi Elazar. So we're looking at that the God is doing judgment against the gods of the Egyptians. Okay, and we're looking seeing as we're looking at we're looking at it, we're seeing how we can relate to the actual words as elements within ourselves. Okay. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, Eloha shel Mitzrayim sehaya. Now, one of the gods of the Egyptians was a lamb. V'tzivah Kodesh Baruch Hu lasot bo shvatim. And God commanded them to do judgment on this lamb. Okay?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. People are in the waiting room. Let me just let them in. View. Oh, admit. There we go. Great. Right. Okay. All right. So we're looking at the Zohar. Everybody who's just come. All right. On the gods of the Egyptians doing judgment. Now, one of the gods of the Egyptians that the Zohar tells us was in fact a lamb, and the Holy Blessed One commanded them to do judgment on this lamb. And so all the rules about how they were to take the lamb, and they were going to tie it to the bedpost for, on the 10th of Nisan, and keep it for 4 days, okay, to the 14th, and then in the evening they were going to burn it with fire, okay. Why were they told to burn it with fire? This is from Devorim, that they were told that when they come into the land and they meet up with all these idol worshippers in Eretz Israel, they had to burn the idols with fire. In the same thing, you have to burn it with fire. Now, what does fire mean? Fire is also, like with the enthusiasm. You've got to get rid of the idol worship within ourselves with enthusiasm. All right? So if we're talking about that the children of Israel had to give up the idol, okay, what they'd worshipped, we need to think for ourselves, what idol do we worship in nowadays? Because like we said earlier, it's not a history book. It's talking about reality now. So we need to think, what is the reality now? Which idol do we worship? And that we all have different aspects, but basically, whenever we have a domain which is separate from God, that's idol worship. And the domain which all of us get is the ego, is the will to receive for ourselves alone. So it's saying to us, when you come to burn it with fire, all right? Do it with enthusiasm, all right? Kadesh Yerechonu Deif. And they actually had to do it so that the smell went out. Now, in Kabbalah, the word recho, smell, it actually always means from below to above. Because that's the
Yedidah, we don't have screen share at the moment.
Oh, you don't? It says I'm screen sharing.
Okay, is it me that's gone out? Okay, sorry.
It's okay. No, good. Let me do it again. Thank you for telling me.
Maybe just with me, because you started it.
Now I have it.
Okay, good. You said. Thank you, Nicole. All right. All right. Okay, very good. All right. So we okay. So that we wanted. So the smell goes up. Now, what is the smell? The smell is that it's like, rech nichoach lashem, sweet smelling fragrance to God. The smell goes up, all right? So it's from below to above. So when we give up our will to receive for ourselves alone, we want to do it with joy. We want to do it with enthusiasm, okay? So that as a gift to God, all right? And the way they were told that they had to deal with this lamb was when they cook it, it had to be with fire, and its head on its knees and on its inside, b'derech bizayon, okay, in a way of contempt, like my will to see for myself alone is something that I really don't want to value, okay? in I'm not talking about our basic nature. That's fine. It's when we use it in the egoistic way, in a way that's separate from God, in a way that it's actually an idol. That's what we want to let go of. This is what they actually did when they did the Korban Pesach. I mean, it's really amazing to think about that. There they were, the children of Israel were in fact idol worshippers at the time, and they were worshipping, the same idols that the Egyptians were worshipping. They had sunk down to the 49th level of Tum'ah, and they were worshipping this idol. And then Moses comes and says, this is what God says, you have to take this idol, all right, that you've been worshipping, and then treat it in a way of contempt. And this is really instruction for us today when we've got, stuff which we're addicted to, which with our will to receive for ourselves alone, with our ego, okay, then we can simply sacrifice it. All right, this is basically what we're asked to do. And not only that, but they threw its bones in, the bones of this lamb were thrown into the marketplace, and it was the hardest of the Egyptians of all. And this is what is written, Shvatim. Now, I don't know what that means on the inner, but you can sort of imagine for yourself, what does it mean? We'll just ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to throw the bones of the will to receive for ourselves alone, of the ego, into the marketplace? I don't know, but I think it's worth a question. When you ask questions, there's a chance for an answer to come. So asking questions is a good idea. Okay, now then. I want to move at this point to Zohar Bo. All right. So I'm not sure if you can see that or not. So I'm going to just make sure you can.
No, I could see that.
Oh, you could. Oh dear. Well, never mind.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. It says Bo at the top.
All right. Okay. All right. Here we go. Vava Hashem limgof et Mitzrayim. Okay, and God passed over to smite the Egyptians. V'gomer Tana Amar Rabbi Yossi Haikra Kashya V'chi Ra'at Adam V'achar Kach Pasach Damashma Desimnahu David V'itema Begin Dama Dihu Mitzvah Amai Levar V'amai Betlat Duchte De Pitra V'haketiv Hu Galei Amikta V'gomer U'ma Tama Ba'ab De'itgalia Dama Lamashkof Al Shtei Mezuzot. Okay, so we've got to the point where the children of Israel have been worshipping this lamb, okay, and they have got to slaughter it, okay, and they were told that they were to take a bunch of hyssop and dip the hyssop into the blood and then put the blood on the doorposts and on the lintel. All right, now Rabbi Yossi's got a question about all this. Mikra ze kasher. This scripture is difficult. Does it mean that God saw the blood and after that he passed over, which is in fact what most people imagine? Shemashmash asa siman, meaning that he made a sign, that God told them to make a sign. All right. So he's saying, well, listen, why would God want a sign? I mean, God knows who's in which house. You don't need to tell God whether there's a Jew in the house or an Egyptian in the house. He knows perfectly well. So God, what is this, what is it for? So he says it can't be for a sign. So is it for the mitzvah of giving blood? And if that's a mitzvah of giving blood, what was the point? Why would it have to be given? And why outside the doorposts? Outside the door, and why on the lintel and on the two posts? And why does he need all this? Everything is manifest before the Holy Blessed One. It's written in the book of Daniel. He knows everything. ולמה היה צריך שיגלה אדם על המשקוף על שתי מזוזות? So what did we need to put this blood on the mantle and on the lintel and on the two doorposts for? It's a very good question. אלא תנא כתיב, וירא השם וינעץ, וכתיב, וירא השם כי רבה רעת האדם בארץ, ותנינן לא יתחזה אשכחותא דלעילא, אלא כד יתחזה לתתא עובדא דעבידו עובדא מיני, ועד עבדין עובדא לתתא לא משגיחין לעבשה. בא הרהורא דעבודה זרה. דכתיב ישמעו לכם בנפדה לבבכם, ומדעביד עובדא אשכחותא דלעילא יתאר, וגין כך קולו, בין לתא ובין לביש, בעובדא דהליא מילתא. All right. So he answers. Okay, so he's asked a question, now he's giving an answer. The questions are always important. So when we learn Zohar, remember, we don't always know the answers. But if you ask a question, the question itself is good, because the question is the vessel, and you never know. So one time, if you ask a question, the light might come in. So we've learnt, it's written, I think it's in Ha'azinu, Vayah Hashem V'yinatz, but this one is more easier to understand, and God saw that the evil of man was great on the earth. Okay, that was when the time of the flood. Okay, and we learn that the consequence, the divine providence, how God acts, does not appear above unless there has already happened an action below. All right, so for example, if a person thinks to himself, I want to go to the supermarket and steal a bar of chocolate, okay, but he only thinks it, and when he gets to the supermarket he doesn't do it, he's not punished for that. Okay, he had a thought and he decided it wasn't right, it wasn't good, he didn't do it. Okay, so if he didn't do it, he's not chayav. Okay. Before the action has happened below, there is no consequences. But there's only one. If a thought of avodah zarah comes into a person's head, okay, manishim b'li ma'aseh, then there is a consequence even without an action. Why? Because avodah zarah, especially if we take it the way we were taking it, is the aspect of egoism. Like, I'm not that we're using all our energies just for our own selfishness, for our own selfish purposes. Okay, that. Just even the thought of that, okay, is already an action. And this is what it says. Take heed lest your heart be enticed. So when we do the action, okay, and that counts as an action, then there is a consequence above. And mishum zakol, and everything follows from this. Bein latov or bein lara. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, everything depends on the actual action. So what did they actually have to do? They actually had to sacrifice the idol. This is what Rabbi Yossi is going to go on to say. Amar Rabbi Yossi, kol shvakei Mitzrayim, malyan tavin havu, v'ad b'kol beita u beita, havu shrichei zinin, Demit katrei b'chashaihu b'inun katrin tata indelatata mitarin urach basaba b'gavaihu. Rabbi Yossi said all the marketplaces of the Egyptians were filled with gods, and not only that, every single house was filled with all sorts of witchcraft. Now he's not talking about the Egyptian houses, he's talking about the children of Israel's houses. Every single house was filled with witchcraft. Okay, that was the situation that they were in then. It's also the situation that we are also in now when we're talking about our wills to receive for ourselves alone. Okay, and these witchcraft connect with the sources, the Ketarim, the sources of the lower aspects below, and awaken the spirit of uncleanness among them. ורזת מילה, תנא, כתיב, לקחתם אגודת עזוב וטבלתם בדם אשר בסף, והגעתם אל המשקוף על שתי המזוזות. ואגודת עזוב למה? בגין לעבר רוח מסבא מבניהו, לחזה בפתחיהו, בהנטלת דוכתי מהימנותא שלמתה. אחד חכה וחד חכה וחד בגביהו, בגין כך הוא פסח השם על הפתח, ולא ייתן המשחית לבוא אל ביתכם לנגוף, משום דחמי שמע קדיש אנשים על פתחה. And the inner meaning of this was, and it's written, and you shall take a bunch of hyssop, you know, what we call za'atar now, and dip it in the blood, which is on the, which was in the basin, and asked, why a bunch of hyssop? And he answers, in order to burn out the spirit of uncleanness from amongst them, and to show on their houses in 3 places their complete faith. Okay? So one on the one hand, one on the other side, on the two doorposts, one on one side, one on the other. And this hints at the 2 lines of service of God. One is on the right, one is on the left. And there's one in the middle, which is the middle line, which is on the lintel, which is hints about the middle line. And because of that, Pesach Hashem al Petach, God jumped over the doorway. And God will not allow the destroyer to come into your house to smite. Because he sees the holy name impressed on the doorway, Shusod Gimel HaKavin, which is the inner meaning of the 3 lines. Now let's just go back a second and have a look what that means for us today, because, you know, obviously we're not going to take bunches of hyssops and paint blood on our doorstep, on our doorway. Okay, but what did they actually do? They actually taken the lamb, which had been a god for them, okay, they slaughtered it. They did it in the way which showed bizayon. They also did it in a way which was do, okay, and now they put the blood on 3 places, perfect faith, one on one side, one on the other, okay, the right hand side and the left hand side. Now the right hand side is the side of giving unconditionally to God. The left-hand side is refraining from the negative. It's so meira va'asei tov. Okay, refraining from the evil is on the left-hand side, because the left-hand side is the vessels of receiving, and therefore we need to watch them, and we need to. That's why you bind the tefillin on the left-hand arm. Okay, and that's the left-hand side is always the problematic bit. Okay, so because that's where the vessels of receiving are. So the left-hand side. They're showing that they don't want to do evil. They're giving back the light. They're not going to receive for themselves alone. And on the right hand side, they're giving unconditionally. So these are the 2 lines of faith in God. And because you've got the 2 lines, then the middle line, which is the presence of God, can come forth. Okay. So this is the middle line. And because of this, they've got their perfect faith in all aspects. God can now pass over the doorway. So from what we see the answer to Rabbi Yossi's question. He said, does God need a sign on the outside? And the answer is no, he doesn't need a sign on the outside. It's we who need to do the work. Okay, so on the right hand side, the left hand side, and allow the middle to come through. Okay, which is the complete faith in God. And that because the complete faith in God that they showed through that action, then God can pass over the doorway and not allow the destroyer to come into the houses to smite. Okay. Now, they actually put the holy name of God. I mean, it says in the Zohar, maybe a bit further on, but they actually like formed the letter Hey, okay, over the doorway. Okay, so you'd have, joined up on one side and just a small bit on the left. Okay, and that would actually give you the letter Hey. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lav hachi. No, sorry. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. I hachi amai dama. Dahataninan. Chiver v'sumak v'chad. Dekalil beini v'gavni. Amar le tre damei havu. Chad demila v'chad depischa. Demila v'chamei. Depischa dina. Now, here comes an even more interesting thing. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda says, if we're talking about these 3 lines, why were they painted in blood? In general, in the Zohar, we taught that these 3 lines are actually got different colors. Usually the right-hand side is white, the left-hand side is red, okay? And the middle one is something between the two and is a type of yellow, okay? However, he says, in fact, there were 2 bloods that they used, which became one for on this action. One was from Brit Milah, that they did circumcision of themselves on that night. And the blood of Milah is Rachamim, even though that it's red. And then the blood of compassion, and the blood of Pesach is judgment. And therefore, in this particular case, when we're looking at the meanings, it's not dependent on the colors. When I first heard that, the children of Israel did Brit Milah on the night of Leil Seder, I couldn't believe it. Because, they were told that they were going to, they understood that they were going out of Egypt. They had to eat the Korban Pesach with their shoes on their feet and their loins girded and their staff in their hand, ready to go. Dafki do Brit Milah. But they were told in the halachot that Moses gave them God gave them through Moses before they left, that that an uncircumcised person cannot eat of it. Okay, and again, I think this is a hint about letting go of the negative, because circumcision is removal of the orla. Okay, and the orla is the will to receive for itself alone. Okay, and coming into holiness. Now, it's very interesting. In another part of the Zohar, it actually says that on the night of Seder night, before they came out of Egypt, they actually only did Milah. There's apparently 2 aspects of Brit Milah. One is Milah, which is removal of the foreskin, and the other one is Pri'ah, okay, which is sort of like exposing the flesh underneath. That they didn't do at this point. They only did Milah. Now, what this is talking about is that they actually, at this point, were only able to let go of the negative. All right? Okay? Basically, let go of the negative and just go, therefore, in faith. They weren't able to receive any of the great light that's coming on Seder night for the sake of giving. They weren't able to use the will to receive for the sake of giving. What they were able to do was giving for the sake of giving. So here, when they painted the blood on the doorpost, it's absolute emunah. It's just going from faith. And this is also the inner meaning of the matzah. Okay, do you remember it says al matzot u'morim yochluhu, that they had to eat the korban Pesach with the matzah and with the bitter herbs. Okay, now why matzah? What is matzah about? Matzah is called lechem oni, the bread of the poor man, because They were poor in the sense that they were just able to stop using their will to receive, okay, for themselves alone, okay? They were able to use faith, but they weren't able to come to receiving for the sake of giving, which is a much higher level. And in fact, what we do is we're commanded to eat matzah. We do a parallel thing nowadays. We remove all the chametz from our houses. Chametz is also the will to receive for itself alone. Chametz and Mitzrayim have the same meanings, basically. So we're removing physically the chametz from our houses. We're removing the aspect of Mitzrayim from ourselves. Okay, we're removing all the puffed up will to receive for ourselves alone, which separates ourselves from God. Okay. Then we do cut chametz on that, and that's the moment when we remove it, okay, and we do biur chametz when we completely nullify it, okay, and then on Leil Seder we actually eat the matzah, which is lechem oni, and that's called the bread of the poor man. I know that in the English Haggadahs it's often translated as bread of affliction. That's not actually what it means. It's the bread of the poor man, meaning that we are poor because we don't have the wherewithal to receive the light for the sake of giving. We can only give for the sake of giving. So there's this tremendous light that comes in on Leil Seder, okay? And we respond with emunah. We respond with faith, okay? And then actually that's the beginning of coming into the framework of holiness. And then gradually, by counting the Omer, we actually build the vessels of receiving for the sake of giving until we're able to come to Har Sinai and actually receive the Torah for the sake of giving. Okay? So this whole process is a process that begins on Seder night with eating the matzah. Okay? So the Korban Pesach was ate with the matzah. Okay? And the bitterness, the burnt, the morim, the bitter herbs that we eat with it is also a fascinating idea. If we think about the Seder plate, I forgot to get my picture ready, but you all know what a Seder plate looks like. If you go according to the Ari, the actual place of the maror is right in the center, okay? So the Ari actually organizes the Seder night, the Seder plate, with the Zroah, which is actually I can find my picture if you want. It won't take a second, and it's much easier with a picture than without. Let's get my picture, 1 second. Otherwise, I'm just, here we go, pictures. There we go, and where is it? Seder plate. I can't find it. You see? When I thought I would have it easily. If I had it quickly, that'd be okay. Well, anyhow, if according to the Ari, the Seder plate is arranged with the Zroah on the right hand side, which is for Chesed. The left hand side is the egg, so that's Chesed on the right is the Zroah. Left hand side is the egg on the left, okay, for Hagigah. And then in the middle, right in the middle, is the maror, which is Tiferet. So you've got Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. The maror is right in the middle, which is Tiferet. And Tiferet is the place of compassion. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the bitterness is compassion? You know, and it says, they embittered our lives with bricks and mortar, okay, and all the field of the Sadeh, and everything they did was befarech, and that's compassion? But the answer is very, very, very interesting. The answer is like this. A person can be enslaved by his ego, by his will to receive himself alone, and not have any idea at all that he's even enslaved. Okay? On the contrary, he thinks it's fine. Okay? A person thinks that to use his ego without any reference to anybody else or to God is okay. He doesn't realize. Okay? And this is what's called double concealment, where a person's fact that he's disconnected from God is even concealed from him. All right? The children of Israel, okay, so long as they were with Joseph, if anything went wrong, they understood that it was because they had been using their wills to receive. Like, for example, when the brothers come down to Egypt and things start going wrong for them, what do they whisper amongst themselves? Because of what we did, God was not within us. Because of our sins, God was not within us. So therefore, they understand that they have responsibility, and because of their own sins, things are going wrong. Okay? But when there's double concealment, a person doesn't make any connection. He thinks that when things are going wrong, oh, it's because the city council said this, or because the weather change, or the climate change, or he puts it on anything. Okay? The last person he realizes is in fact it's due to himself. Okay? So what is bitterness? When you actually realize that you're enslaved. Okay? The actual realization of our own enslavement is in fact compassion. So ma'or is put right in the middle. And we often use lettuce. Lettuce is actually the one mentioned in the Gemara. Okay? And in the Gemara it says chas al, I can't remember the actual way, but the word chas, that God has rachmanus. Chas is chasa is the word for lettuce in Aramaic, and it comes from the word of compassion. Chasa, God has pity on us. So what is the pity? To actually be aware of our enslavement. So we've got here the Korban Pesach is the giving up of the idol. The people did Brit Milah, to let go of their will to receive themselves alone. They're eating matzah to come into the framework of holiness. Okay, even just at the beginning, that's the matzah, to start the framework of holiness. Okay, and the morim is actually to actually have the recognition, okay, that we have been enslaved. All right, and okay, and then they go and paint the blood, or they paint the blood on the doorposts, and then they eat the Korban Pesach. So the blood on the doorposts is the expression of emunah and the name of God on the doorposts. So when we look at it that way, you can really, really, really see what tremendous work the children of Israel did on Leil Seder. And they've therefore built the right vessels for the light of redemption which comes in on this night. Ayin Tet. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, לאו הכי, אלא כמו דאולפנה, דחזה הוא דם הקודש בריחו לרחמי, כאילו הווה חיוור בגו גבני, כמו שכתוב, ועובר עלייך, וירך מתבוססת בדמייך, ואומר לך בדמייך חיי, ואומר לך בדמייך חיי. ואף אגב דהווה סומקה, התחזה לרחמי, דכתיב בדמייך חיי. ובגין כך ושים פתחה בתלת ציטרין, חד חכה וחד בעיניהו. Rabbi Yehuda said, this is what we've learned, that when the Holy Blessed One transformed the blood into mercy, right, as if it was white, okay? So it's like, although the blood itself was red, it's as if he turned it into white, okay? And this is what it says, when I pass over you and I see you like drowning in your blood, and I say to you, in your blood you shall live. That is, even though it was red, it was transformed into mercy. so this idea of judgment and mercy, transforming the judgment into mercy, what does it mean? Okay, well, when there's a judgment against the Egyptians, that's mercy for Israel. Okay, when we stop using our will to receive for ourselves alone, our egoistic ways, okay, it can feel like a judgment, all right, because we're used to it, we're involved with it, it's difficult to stop it, okay. We talked about the fear earlier, okay. In many ways it's hard to stop, so it feels like a judgment, but we have to remember it's mercy for the soul, okay. What's negative for the Egyptians was freedom for the Israelites. So in the same way, what feels negative to the will to receive for itself alone is freedom for the soul. Okay. So even though it was red, it turned into mercy, as it's written, and you shall live in your blood. So therefore here, we shouldn't look at the colors, okay, but the fact that there was listed on the door on all three sides, one here, and one at the top, okay, which hints about the three lines, okay. And then there's a nice little discussion between Rabbi Chizkiah and Rabbi Yossi, whether we're talking about Chesed and Gevurah, or whether we're talking about Tiferet. Okay, I think that's sort of beyond us. I mean, you know, I just shows you, in my view, that the great rabbis who are discussing it are absolutely seeing inside themselves, you know, perceiving the processes inside themselves. It's a description, and that's why when you have a description, it's not a theoretical, you know, analysis or anything. It's an absolute description of what they see in their consciousness. So it doesn't surprise me that one person's going to say, oh, it's Chesed and Gevurah, the two lines, and Tiferet is the middle line, and the other one says it's actually the whole thing is Tiferet, and inside Tiferet you've got Chesed of Tiferet and Gevurah of Tiferet. Okay, so I don't think that's really matters now. Just looking to see, because we've only got a couple of moments left. Oh, pretty well. Let's just do this last one. Pay bet is a nice one. Tav Amar Rabbi Abba, Kagavna Deshma Kadisha, Hey Avdu Bahu Shata, Mashma Kadisha it Chaza Bahe Shata Dina, Avhachi it Chaza Hai Dama Bahe Shata Dina, Diktiv Vat Adam al Mashkof, Vashtem Zuzot, Vashima de Kol Husumka, Let Chaza Daha it Chaza Bedina Mevad Nukmin. Rabbi Abba said, just like in the holy name of God, the Hay, which is what they made on that moment with the three lines, two on the doorposts and one in the top above, which is like the letter Hay. And this actually is the Malchut. And therefore, this holy name became at that moment judgment on the Egyptians. Okay, and that's why the blood at that moment became judgment. When God blood on the mashkof and on the two doorposts, like I said earlier, like the Zohar said earlier, it wasn't a sign for God. He didn't want a sign. He wanted to know that the children of Israel are doing the action, okay, of slaughtering the idol, of coming forwards in faith, of starting their work in Kedusha. That's what he needed to know. That's what he needed. He needed the Seila Mata, the action below, to bring about the action above. Okay, and therefore that this mark, or which was shown, it was in red, which hints about judgment, is to show that what is mercy for Israel becomes judgment and vengeance, or whatever, judgment, whatever, against the Egyptians. Okay, and again, you can take Israel as being the soul, Yashar El, and the Mitzrayim being the will to receive for ourselves alone, which is this narrow consciousness that we all fall into. And so the Geula, this tremendous redemption that we have on Leila Seder, is just the most incredible redemption, where God simply just doesn't look to see whether we're worth it, whether we're good or bad, we've done it or we haven't done it. He just takes us out. Whoop. Okay? Doesn't look to see whether we deserve it or we don't deserve it. That's the wonderful thing of Seder night, that God can just simply lift us out of whatever negative place we're in and absolutely bring us to a new conscious place. Okay? This is the absolute miracle of Seder night. It's Itaruta de Le'ela. It's awakening from above, that God just simply took the children of Israel as they were, with the 49th level of Tumah, and just whoop, takes us out. And that's the wonderful miracle of Seder night. Okay, great. That's it then, everybody. Wonderful that you managed to join me.
Sorry I was late, but timed is, I haven't got used to these new times since they changed the clocks.
Oh, they changed it in Denmark now.
Yeah, it was like a week ago, but it's still Sunday. It's sort of, it's strange.
Yeah.
It sort of,
Oh, yeah,
it didn't feel like 7 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. Well, that's lovely. Okay. Listen, next week is Erev Pesach, so I don't think we're going to manage it. We've got to do B'dikat Hometz, isn't it? Thursday night we've got to do B'dikat Hometz?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, I know we're not going to manage it next week. But Bezrat Hashem will carry on after that.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
And
wonderful. Yes,
I praise the mayor.
Yeah, kosher sameach. What do you say?
Yeah.
Pesach kasher v'sameach. There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Have a lovely and kosher Pesach and enjoy yourselves. Have a lovely, lovely, happy time.
Pesach Sameach. Thank you.
You too, love. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Pesach Sameach.
Pesach sameach.
Kasher v'sameach. Bye-bye.
Bye.